Welcome back to Introduction to Computer Science at SSFS. In these next series of videos, we're going to take a look at loops. And loops are structures that you'll use whenever you want to repeat a series of tasks multiple times. In Python and in most programming languages, there are two main types of loops that you'll use. And the first is for loops, and this video is going to cover that topic. And you're going to use for loops most of the time when you know exactly how many times you want to repeat something. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So the structure of a for loop is pretty simple. And if you remember back when we were using Turtle, you actually saw a for loop. Each for loop starts with the keyword for. And the next part needs to be a variable name that's going to keep track of how many times we run through the loop. And for most of the time, all you're going to need is a simple counter variable like x. And you could use something longer if you wanted, but for most cases, x is going to be fine. And then in range, and then parentheses. And the number that goes in the parentheses is how many times you want the loop to run. So if I want to do something 5 times, I'll put 5. And then like we've seen with functions and if statements, a for loop line ends with a colon. And then of course, when I hit return, everything's going to be indented. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out what x is each time through the for loop. Okay, so my structure says for x in range 5, anything underneath that's indented is going to be repeated 5 times. So it should print out whatever x is 5 times. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. I'm going to do run. I'm going to run my loops program. And here's the output down in the console here. Notice that it started with 0. So the first time through the loop, x was 0. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. So it ran 5 times, but it started with 0 and ended with 4. And most times in computer science, whenever you're doing a counter or a loop of this kind, you almost always are going to start with 0. Now, if you have a particular need to start with 1, then you can, in the parentheses, you can say, all right, I'm going to go from 1 to 5. So it's going to start with 1, and let's see what that looks like when we run it. Notice that it only ran 4 times. It didn't include this last number. So it went 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you have 2 arguments in your range function, it includes the first one, but not the second one. So if you really need 5 numbers, then you have to put 1 more than what you need. And now if I run it, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, it does not include that number. Now the range can have a third argument as well, and that third argument is what's called a step, and it's basically how much you're counting by. So I can go from 1 to 6 counting by 2s, so that's every other number. So if I run that, it goes 1, 3, and 5, and again it does not include the last number, but it goes by 2s. I could go by 3s if I wanted to, and I get 1 and 4, and it keeps going until it passes that second argument. Okay? So beginning, end, and step, and you'll very rarely need step. Let's look at an example of a for loop. We'll look at a very simple one. Let's say I wanted to generate a series of random numbers. So let's generate 10 random numbers, and again I wanted to go 10 times. I don't really care what x is. I care what the random number is. So I'm going to say number equals random dot rand int 1 through 100. I'm going to generate random numbers from 1 to 100. And notice that random is underlined, which means I forgot to import the random module at the top of my program. So then let's go ahead and print number. And let's see what that looks like. Notice I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 random numbers, all between 1 and 100. And we've seen the random function before. So again, for loops are pretty simple. They're used when you want to do something a specific number of times. In the next video, we'll look at while loops, which you use when you're not quite sure how many times you want something to run.